it's an enormous win in the division. If they lose the game, they're not only a game back, but the Colts would have swept them in a year where Troy and Joe did a good job explaining this on the broadcast, where the Texans have pushed all their chips to the middle of the table saying, we can win right now. We've got a superstar quarterback on his rookie contract, where they thought they were going to have multiple superstars on defense. Obviously, Watt's injury changes that. DeAndre Hopkins continues to make the case that he might be the best receiver in football. So a loss last night to drop to 6-5 with the Patriots looming next week would have been absolutely devastating for them. With that said, I wasn't overly impressed by what we saw from them. I wasn't overly impressed by the game plan. I picked the Colts to win, and I was wrong, and I got to own that. But this was a game where it felt to me, Canty, the Texans could have whatever they wanted down the field, and they only took those shots when they absolutely had to. It's like, all right, we've had a 3-and-out. We can't get the run game going. I guess we'll let our two best players get involved in the game. Will Fuller was unguardable throughout the game, and then DeAndre Hopkins was one play he just broke wide open in a coverage bust, and the other play he made a great DeAndre Hopkins fingertip catch in the end zone. So listen, Deshaun was very good aside from the pick. DeAndre was DeAndre. The Texans' passing game should be its strength. I wish someone would tell the coaching staff that. With all that said, and T.Y. Hilton said as much after the game, if T.Y. Hilton was dealing with a lower body injury, he looked like he was dealing with a hands injury. If he could make one of his two catches that were critical drops, I think we're talking about a different outcome. But he dropped the passes, DeAndre Hopkins made the catches, and the Texans take the lead in the division.
Yeah, that was the difference in the game. You're going back to the 3rd and 4 at the end of the third quarter for the Colts. T.Y. drops it on that deep out.
Yep.
And then on the first possession in the fourth quarter, he drops another one on 3rd and 4 where he's got it in his hands and it gets knocked out by the DB.
He said afterwards, it's all on me. Forget injuries, forget anything. That was on me.
Well, yeah, it's on him. But, I mean, clearly you could see that the Colts were dealing with some deficiencies, some medical issues. They missed Marlon Mack, even though Jonathan Williams stepped in and did a serviceable job. There's a difference not having him in the backfield. And, of course, T.Y. with the calf injury. And then Jacoby Brissett. I mean, it was clear throughout that entire game that left knee was still bothering him and that ligament sprain. So, I mean, I don't want to make excuses for the Colts, but they were clearly hampered by the injuries. That being said, the Texans weren't able to have a dominant performance in a gotta-have-it divisional game. And, Nick, you nailed it on the head when you talked about the urgency that this team has approached the 2019 season with, because they've gone all in. The draft capital that they used to acquire Laramie Tunsil and Kenny Stills and Jerry Conley. I mean, you're talking about them burning first and third round picks for the next 2 drafts. So Bill O'Brien understands that all the pressure is on him to be able to deliver this season. And if this team didn't make it into the playoffs, that would be a problem. Last night, at least that win allows them to keep that dream alive.
I don't know if the better team won last night, but the Texans are coming off a terrible loss last week. As you said, it was certainly not a dominant win this week. I mean, we know what, Deshaun Watson can do. He didn't look spectacular last night, and he obviously looked terrible last week. What is the ceiling for this Texas team after what you've seen the last 2 weeks?
The same ceiling it has been every year since the franchise came into existence in the early 2000s. Win a first-round playoff game in the wild card weekend, almost assuredly in that 3 o'clock window against of the 4 playoff games that weekend, the one people think there's going to be the least interest in, and then get crushed in round 2. Whether they are the #1 wild card team or the divisional champion out of the AFC South, their absolute ceiling is they can play Buffalo or this Indy team or the Steelers if they get hot, or the Raiders in round 1 in Houston, maybe win that game. Now, last year against the Colts, they lost that game. A couple years ago, they got blanked 30-0 in that wild card weekend game. Maybe win that game and then play a really good team coming off a bye and get annihilated, which is why, to me, this Texans team ranks among the teams I'm most disappointed in thus far this season. You have all the components that you should need to be right there with Baltimore, Kansas City as the teams that are trying to chase and catch New England. But I don't know why anyone would have any faith that if Baltimore and New England get the byes, which it looks like they will, the Texans could go into either of those buildings and forget win, even present a real challenge for those opponents, even though both of those teams have issues of their own. So I don't want to rain on the Texans because they did get a critical win last night, but not that dissimilar to my hometown Chiefs a week ago or Monday night. Yeah, you got a big win that you had to have, but how did you look when you got it? Style points matter in projection, not in the standings, but in projecting what they will be. I was not overly impressed with the Texans struggling with a Colts team that clearly was not at their best.
Yeah, nor should you be impressed with what they did last night. I think the biggest reason why we don't have a lot of confidence that they could go on the road in the divisional round and beat the Baltimore Ravens or the New England Patriots is just because they're going to be at a deficit when it comes to coaching. I mean, you bring it up every single game the Texans play, the game management by Bill O'Brien. Last night he gets bailed out by the referees with that Deshaun Watson fumble that the referees didn't necessarily catch. And it was a situation where he called timeout and gave them extra time.
Gave them a chance. It would have been,
review it.
If people didn't stay up late, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ken. I want people to understand. The Texans are running out the clock. All they have to do is not turn the ball over, and the Colts are going to, if they get the ball back, get it back with 10 seconds left. Deshaun fumbles. Darius Leonard makes a great play.
Great play.
And I thought Darius Leonard pretty clearly recovered the fumble with one arm and signaled to the refs with the other, I have the football. The referees saw it a different way, but it's within 2 minutes. It's the ability for it to be reviewed. It's not going to be reviewed. And then Bill O'Brien calls timeout to give him an extra 2 minutes to potentially review it instead of just snapping the ball. Now, it never got reviewed, but that could have been one of the biggest coaching gaffes of the season, and it could have flipped this entire division on its head.
But when we talk about games where the pressure and the magnitude of it is spotlighted, I mean, clearly this was one of those games. Bill O'Brien always seems to have one of those coaching decisions that makes you scratch your head, and that's why you can't trust him, especially in a head-to-head matchup with a John Harbaugh or a Bill Belichick.
All right, so the Texans get the win over the Colts. They're now first place in the AFC South at 7-4. Week 12 is underway.
Number one, I'll just say, is health. Like, I don't know who's going to play for San Francisco. Green Bay, aside from the Devontae Adams injury, which they were able to withstand, they've been one of the healthier, really good teams throughout this season. San Francisco, all of a sudden, I mean, listed on the injury report that we don't know who's playing: Emmanuel Sanders, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Dee Ford, Matt Breida, even their kicker, Robbie Gould, hasn't practiced yet this week. You are talking about key components, almost all of which on offense, aside from Dee Ford, for a team that already, to me, struggles offensively. Additionally, San Francisco the last 3 weeks starting to look a little leaky. They were dominating Arizona 3 weeks ago. Arizona makes a charge late in the game to cut that to 3. San Francisco escapes. They play Seattle. Seattle had that game won, to me, multiple times. San Francisco could have taken the tie. Foolishly doesn't. They lose that game. And then last week they play Arizona again. And Arizona beat them for 59.5 minutes. San Francisco got a very beneficial spot, which would have put them in a position to kick a game-tying field goal. Instead, they get a first down, score a touchdown the next play to save that game. Green Bay, on the other hand, is coming off a bye. After they had the bad loss in Week 9 of the season, they turned things back around with the good win in Week 10, and they've got to be saying to themselves, man, it's been a long time since the playoffs went through Lambeau Field. It's been a long time since we didn't have to win 3 games to get to the Super Bowl, only had to win 2. With a win this week, they are in brilliant position to get a bye for all those reasons. And, gun to my head, Aaron Rodgers, Jimmy Garoppolo, I'll always go Aaron Rodgers, even though I know there's a lot of other aspects to it. For all those reasons, I like Green Bay.
Yeah, and you go back to that Week 9 loss that they had against the Chargers, and Aaron Rodgers came out after the game and said he had some issues with the team's travel schedule and getting in late. I mean, coming off of a bye week, you would think going back out to the West Coast, they would have that on the agenda in terms of making sure that all of those different issues were buttoned up and that the team, from a mental standpoint, is ready to go with their best performance of the season. But, I mean, it's all out there in front of them for the Green Bay Packers. I think this matchup sets up well for them. The one thing that this team has to do is that they have to force this game to be won by Jimmy Garoppolo for the 49ers.
Yep.
They can't allow the 49ers' offensive line and their running game to be the difference. They can't allow them to control the time of possession, eat up the clock, and dictate the complexion of the game. I think that defense's challenge is being able to stop the run with their front seven and then force Jimmy Garoppolo to make plays in the passing game down the field. That's the one question mark that we've had for the San Francisco 49ers this entire season. That's why a lot of people, including you and me, are still still skeptical of the 49ers as we inch closer to the postseason. We just don't know what to expect from their quarterback. So to me, if you're the Green Bay Packers, this game is going to hinge on your defense's ability to be able to force Jimmy Garoppolo to beat him. You saw last week that he made the two mistakes in the red zone. He's going to throw the ball to the opposing team. You know that they have the personnel in the secondary to take advantage of it. It's just a matter of making sure the game comes down to that.
We're heading into Week 12. The 49ers have one of the best records in the league, if not the best record, tied with the Patriots. And yet the jury's almost still out on the 49ers. So this is going to be a tough stretch for him. They got the Packers, they're at Baltimore, and then they're at New Orleans. So if you want to know who the San Francisco 49ers are, I feel like the next 3 to 4 weeks are going to really give you a good sense. We know who the Packers are.
Listen, they have 6 games remaining, obviously. 4 of them are as difficult as it could be. Green Bay, at Baltimore, at New Orleans, and then the final week of the year at Seattle, a team that already beat them. So I have been skeptical of San Francisco. I think that skepticism is going to prove itself out well-founded over the next month. On the flip side, for Green Bay, a loss in this game to me would be particularly devastating for them. Even though they're 8-2, they'd still be tied for the divisional lead, even assuming that, Minnesota's on a bye, so they would be tied for divisional lead even with the win. Because they have, if we're being honest, underachieved in the decade of Aaron Rodgers. This number is baffling to me, but I promise it's true. Since Aaron Rodgers has been the quarterback, the Green Bay Packers and the San Francisco 49ers, the 49ers, who in that stretch, have gone through a half dozen quarterbacks, nearly as many coaches. They had one good stretch of football. In this, since Rodgers has been the quarterback, they have the same number of first-round buys. They have the same number of conference championship game appearances and the same number of Super Bowl appearances. Now, Green Bay obviously won theirs, San Francisco lost theirs, but it is remarkable that the Niners, who have been in flux seemingly up and down this decade with one period of success under Harbaugh, and the Packers, who have had this whole decade the most talented quarterback arguably ever, that come the postseason and postseason success, it's remarkably similar. If the Packers win this game, they position themselves really well to at least, move into a lead on San Francisco in that regard. If they lose this game, the Niners are the team that, once again, is looking like they're going to have the bye, while Green Bay is going to be fighting with Minnesota just to win their division.
No, you're absolutely right, but I think the organization underachieving with Aaron Rodgers is why a couple of years ago they moved away from Ted Thompson and went with Brian Gutekunst, the new general manager, and now they have a new head coach in Matt LaFleur, and they're trying to make it work with him. But, I mean, in terms of what this team can be, I don't think we're seeing the best version of the Green Bay Packers. I don't think we've seen it yet, and so there's something to be said for trying to play your best football as you go down the final stretch of the season. I'm looking for the Packers coming off of that bye week to start a run here with the San Francisco 49ers being the first team on deck.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.